ESPN Radio. This is the Thundering Herd Podcast.
I try not to get too emotional about sports, and I never really like talking about death on the air. I mean, death is scary enough. The other day I was talking to my daughter. She's a teenager. Like, I'm kind of scared of death, Dad. I said, yeah, at 14 I was. I'm like 50 now. I'm scared of your death, not mine. But I want to talk about death this morning. Kenny Stabler, former Raider quarterback, died. And I first started loving the NFL in the 70s. Like in the early to mid-70s. The first Super Bowl I ever watched as a kid was the 1972 Super Bowl, Miami Dolphins, Washington Redskins. I can remember it, black and white TV in my bedroom. I was rooting for the Redskins because at the time I thought Washington was Washington State, and that's where I lived. And the reason I thought that is because Pat Summerall and Tom Brookshire would come on the air during a Redskins game. George Allen was their coach. They played the Cowboys, and they would show the White House. And as a kid, I grew up in the coast of Washington, and when we drove to Seattle, we would go by Olympia, and you would see the White House. And I'm a little kid in the back of a car. And I saw that White House, and I thought, oh, so I live in Washington, and I got a White House. And the Washington Redskins, they're in Washington, and they got a White House. So for a while in my childhood, didn't have the internet. I just figured the Washington Redskins were my local team. I think I figured it out one day and thought, boy, that was foolish. But I fell in love with the NFL in the 70s, early 70s. And I can remember watching the first Super Bowl I ever watched was on a little black and white TV in my room. Just to have a television as a kid in your room was a big deal because my neighbor friends didn't. We must have been well-to-do. I had a little black and white. Well, maybe a Sony or something, And I can remember falling in love with the league. And the Raiders and the Steelers and the Dolphins and the Chargers in the 70s and early 80s were so damn entertaining. And what I really remember about the NFL, I didn't root for any of those teams. I didn't root for the Chargers, although I love Dan Fouts, and I didn't root for the Steelers, though I love Terry Bradshaw, and I didn't root for the Raiders. But man, Terry Bradshaw may have symbolized his team more than any player in league history. I'm not sure there's ever been a player that felt more like his team. The Raiders in a corporate league are the last non-corporate team. They were shaggy. It always felt like they were playing the edges. The Patriots feel like that, but they're still part of the logo, the shield. The Patriots are Warner Brothers. The Raiders, they're an independent film company, and their favorite movie ever was Reservoir Dogs. They were inappropriate. Always felt like they were kind of cheating. They sat on their helmets. Other teams didn't do that. Shirts were untucked. They used too much stickum. League had to clamp down. And here was Terry Bradshaw, a lefty in a righties league that always seemed to get calmer in the big moments. And I fell in love with football in the mid-early 70s, the mid-70s, late 70s, early 80s. I mean Stabler. I'm sorry. I keep saying Stabler. Kenny Stabler. Kenny Stabler passed away. And I remember these Raider games, and it would be 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:30, 5 o'clock on a Sunday night at my house. And my mom, after a busy weekend, I would watch TV on my little TV and watch Kenny Stabler and then the Raider teams, and they were wild. I didn't love them. I was fascinated. And the California sun would be dropping. And some of you go back to your childhood with music. I go back to the NFL. I go back to these 4 o'clock games that were ending at, whatever time they end, and the sun's going down, and I'm watching, they're going later into a Sunday, and I'm getting tired as a kid. Well, I'm going to watch Sunday night. I'm going to watch the Disney movie later that night on NBC or whatever. And I can just remember all these late game Sunday wild games. I don't know why this stands out to me as a kid. I don't know why. The games are wrapping up. It's fourth quarter. They're playing the Chargers. They're playing Bradshaw and the Steelers. They're playing and it's like going late. Maybe it goes into overtime, and it's 4:30, 4:38, and it's getting a little darker, and the crowd's crazy. And I don't know why. But that's, when I go back to my childhood, that's it. It's the 72 Super Bowl, Redskins and Dolphins, and it's Raider games drifting into the late 4:30 time, wrapping up. It felt like they were all close. They'd played the Chargers. They played the Dolphins. They played the Steelers. They probably weren't all close. But it felt like every time on a Sunday as a kid you'd turn on, because the Raiders were so popular and so were the Cowboys who played in that stadium with that hole in the roof and the bad shadows. I just remember as a kid these Kenny Stabler Raider teams. I didn't even like them. I thought they cheated. I didn't even like them. I was fascinated. A friend of mine in high school got into the Raiders locker room he won something at school, and they were all in their jock straps smoking and playing cards right before a game. They were smoking and playing cards. My friend's name was Brad Jones. I was best friends with his brother, Jack Jones. That is the NFL to me. I'm not to get nostalgic, but that's the league. When I think of the NFL, a lot of you guys are 20, 30 years old. I think of that 70s Raiders, Steelers, Kenny Stabler, who passed away. And the guy was so accurate in an era when Bob Greasy, the great Bob Greasy, completed 56%, Bradshaw 52%, and Namath 50%. He completed 60% of his throws in the 70s. One year it was 67%. Dave Casper, Branch, Bolitnikoff, the offensive lines, John Madden. And then those Raider teams, they are the last non-corporate team in our most corporate league. They're the last. They're contrarian. They were the outliers. Because the NFL was getting very corporate. Now it's completely corporate. They're the last. They're Reservoir Dogs. They're the independent film. They broke every rule. They sat on their helmets. And they also, Ken Stabler is also part, not only of those great teams and those iconic classic Raider teams, he's also part of the Holy Roller play. My staff is mostly young guys in their 20s. They don't remember this. Kenny Stabler was playing one of those San Diego teams. It was years and years and years ago. And I think the game was in San Diego. And it just happened to be one of these Raider games, and the California sun's dipping, and it's 4 o'clock, 4:15, and the game's, I think, ending up. And it's the very end of the game. John Madden's the coach, and Stabler's the quarterback. And Oakland is trailing a very good San Diego team. And Stabler rolls out to his right. He was a lefty, and he gets sacked, but he flips the ball forward, and it gets kicked. It's called the Holy Roller play, and it's the reason you cannot move a fumble forward. A lot of you 20-year-olds, here's the play. Bill King calls it. Stabler is part of one of the most important rule moments in league history. They got hosed, many believe, later in New England. This one, they got the break.
Here comes the rush. He sidesteps. Can he throw? He can't. The ball flipped forward is loose. A wild scramble. 2 seconds on the clock. Casper grabbing the ball. It is ruled a fumble. Casper has recovered in the end zone. The Oakland Raiders have scored on the most zany, unbelievable, absolutely impossible dream of a play. Madden is on the field. He wants to know if it's real. They said yes. Get your big butt out of here. He does. There's nothing real in the world anymore. The Raiders won the football game. The Chargers are standing, looking at each other. They don't believe it. Nobody believes it.
That was in the late 70s in San Diego, the Holy Roller play with a great, legendary Bill King. Kenny Stabler's passed away at 69 years old. And I really go back to the mid-70s when I was mostly, as a kid, a baseball fan. And those Raider teams are such a part. I didn't even like them. They are such a part of my childhood. And then as I lived in the Pacific Northwest, we finally got a team in 1977. We got the Seahawks. And our number one rival immediately was the Raiders. And what was great as a kid is I didn't have pro sports outside of the Sonics as a kid. We got baseball in the NFL in the late 70s. And the two things I always remember as a kid, those Mariner teams in the 70s and 80s were lousy, but always gave the Yankees fits at the Kingdome. And those Seahawk teams were lousy, but they always gave the Raiders fits in the Pacific Northwest. Kenny Stabler's passed away at 69. Huge, iconic part of the league. The last non-corporate team in an incredibly corporate league.
Want more of the Herd? The Thundering Herd Podcast.
I saw this story. Chandler Parsons is a good friend with DeAndre Jordan, and he tried to talk him into going to the Dallas Mavericks, and DeAndre Jordan, a Clipper, said, okay, I'll be a Maverick, and then woke up a couple days later and said, my bad, I want to go back to the L.A. Clippers. And let me just say this. Chandler Parsons came out and said he's not ready to be a franchise player. He was scared. He was scared to take the next step in his career. There was no other reason other than that. He was comfortable, and he's got friendships there. Let me say this, not to criticize Chandler Parsons, but to explain DeAndre Jordan. First of all, moving and starting over is tough for most Americans. Think about how beautiful this country is, North America. You've been to Toronto, you've been to Vancouver, you've been to Seattle, you've been to New York City in the fall. Have you been to Boston, Nantucket, Miami, Los Angeles, the coast of Florida, the coast of California? There is beauty everywhere, opportunities everywhere. And almost half of America will never move more than 20 miles from their small hometown. Why? Because moving scares people, even pro athletes. My ex-wife and my wife, I've moved cross-country 4 or 5 times. They seek change. Probably why I married both. I seek change. I like new stuff. I like new shows. I like new stuff. Most people don't. Most people are not into it. Most people like tradition. Most people like a grocery store. They know where it's at. So part of this for DeAndre Jordan is the move thing. Half the country struggles with it. Secondly, to defend DeAndre Jordan again, maybe DeAndre Jordan realized, and this is actually true, that he is not a superstar. He's a good player, not great. Because that's what he is. So as we criticize DeAndre Jordan for going back to a better team with better friendships and realizing he's not a superstar, those are all commendable. And though the fear of leaving isn't as commendable, it's a real part of the American DNA. Half this country lives where they grew up, which would be fine if you grew up in Park Avenue and you had opportunities, but most of us grow up in the sticks. So, a lot of criticism. Now, I thought Stephen A. Smith had a very, very interesting point that the move by him, verbally committing and backing out, may change the landscape a little for owners.
You're not going to see any trust on the part of owners with players. Secondly, and more importantly, DeAndre Jordan may have very well opened the Pandora's box because you might have owners in the future, executives in the future, giving their word and then feeling like it's okay to renege because what's good for the goose, meaning the players, could very well be good for the gander.
I agree. He could have changed things and added a little more cynicism to the free agent process. Joe in beautiful Nashville. What up, Joe?
Hey, good morning, Colin. Colin, a couple of quick things for you. One, I love the take you just had because I grew up in Boston, spent 15 years in St. Petersburg, Florida. Now I've been in Nashville for 10. And when I go back to visit, I'm always amazed that, they think that's the only way to live. They live 3 miles from their mom,
yep,
4 miles from their grandmother. And when you go up there to visit, it's like, you guys don't even have central air in your homes. You live like animals. You've got to experience something different. Another thing, Colin, growing up as a Patriots fan and still being so to this day, I love when you talked about the stable play that helped, shape the rule that it is today, that they can't advance the ball on 4th down. And being the karmic universe that it is, everyone likes to say that, the tuck rule they got away with. Well, no, because a lot of people would forget, and you probably remember like I do, in 1976, when the Raiders won their first Super Bowl, and their only one was Stabler, because Plunkett was the other two, of course.
Yep.
In the divisional round, they played the Patriots, and there was a 4th down, and there was a phantom roughing the passer call that kept the Raiders' drive alive, and they eventually ended up winning the Super Bowl. So, it's just amazing how those plays just affect the future and, shape things how they are. And we really appreciate your take on that 70s football today. I mean, just really amazing when you talked about the percentage of passes completed. I mean, look like you said, 60%, and that was miraculous because, people it wasn't a throwing league. I mean, even a guy like Famous.
But listen, Bob Greasy was accurate. He completed 56%. Stabler was over 60 and had a 67% year, Joe. I'm getting so many emails of people saying this. Colin, I remember watching the California sun go down in those Raiders-Steeler games. I really do. I remember it's 4:15, it's 4:20. They're going to overtime. It's a late Raider game. The California sun's coming down. There's shadows on the field in the stadium. That's my earliest memory of NFL regular season big games. The shadow, Raider Stadium coming down, Stabler behind that great offensive line, Cliff Branch, Freddie Bolitnikoff in the slot, Dave Casper, best O-lines in the league, facing Steeler teams that had the best defense in the history of the league. If you go back to 1975, I could be wrong on this. Look this up, Rob. You go back to 1975. The Pittsburgh Steelers were so good defensively, I remember a year in which I think they threw consecutive shutouts. And I'm not joking. So you had this Raider offense, best offensive line, best speed receiver, best tight end, one of the best quarterbacks, best hands in the league, Freddie Bolitnikoff, Hall of Famers O-line, Steelers defensive line, Mean Joe, LC, Dwight White, 3 Pro Bowlers. My staff is laughing. They're like, you sound like everybody's grandpa. I'm telling you, this is like Led Zeppelin for me. The Raiders, the Steelers, Roger Staubach Cowboys, it's my Led Zeppelin. It's my stairway to heaven.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Brian Windhorst is my buddy, NBA insider. There's a bunch of stuff to get through here in about 5 minutes. We were just talking about the story about Kevin Love said he met LeBron in Los Angeles. They were both out there at the same time, and they had a kind of a face-to-face meeting, and it was very real and very authentic. Do you know exactly the pitch by LeBron to Kevin Love, Brian?
I think it was the other way around. I think it was Kevin talking to LeBron about, hey, what's your vision here? What can I expect? And I think it's very powerful statement on what LeBron is looking at, that Kevin walked out of that thing and 2 days later agreed to a 5-year contract. Kevin could have gone 2 years, 3 years, 1 year even. I don't think anybody would have blinked. But the fact that he committed himself for that long, basically the rest of his prime years, I think he was made comfortable by LeBron that, they were going to work together. It was going to be long-term. And that any issues that they had this year were very minor. And so I think that's the powerful thing. Colin, I remember back in 2009, the Cavs were coming off a 66-win season, and they tried to get Trevor Ariza. They thought that was going to be a great signing. Ariza had just helped the Lakers win a title. And Ariza was ready to sign with the Cavs. And he called LeBron and said, hey, they're offering me a 5-year deal. Are you committed here? And LeBron said, I've got 1 year left on my contract. And Ariza got spooked and signed in Houston. And the fact that, after meeting with Kevin Love this time, Love committed to 5, I think says the way LeBron's looking at things differently in Cleveland now.
Yeah, great story. I didn't know that story. That's very interesting. Trevor Ariza should have broken that story, not you NBA guys. When you look at LeBron's contract, basically it feels like to some degree he just wants to do 1-year deals to keep maximizing his dollars because I guess he just trusts his body, right?
Yeah, I guess when you already have if he's made $150 million, he's probably made at least that in endorsements. I think it frees you up to make decisions differently. There's really no risk for him. The Cavs, they're not even going to give him a physical. Basically, here's how his contract went yesterday. This is how it was described to me. His agent called the Cavs up and said LeBron would like to re-sign. They said, great. They said, take the same contract from last year, put the new max numbers in it, print it out, and send it over. That was the contract negotiation. There may have been some more pleasantries. There's not going to be any physical. There's not going to be any negotiation. The maximum amount of money LeBron can get up front, there's rules in the CBA about that, about what you can get the day you sign. I'm sure he's getting that. He has the opt-out date exactly the way he wants. There is negotiation. He makes all the demands. And when you're at that level, and there's so few players that are at that level, it's really freeing. And even if LeBron got hurt this next year, I can't imagine the injury that wouldn't prevent the Cavs from re-signing him. So he has the freedom. And really what it is, Colin, he believes he's been vastly underpaid. And he realizes what the future is going to be. He's going to be almost certainly the third player ever to earn $30 million in a season after Kobe and Jordan did. And if everything goes according to his plan, he's going to be the first ever player to hit $40 million in a season, probably in 3 years from now.
Brian Windhorst, DeAndre Jordan extended the conversation. The NBA got a lot of press, a little ugly, but it's still, we're talking basketball, not baseball. What is the fallout to you, if any, with the DeAndre Jordan Clipper Mavs situation?
None. I mean, on Monday, they're having a meeting in Vegas, the annual competition committee, where they look at rule changes, and they may give it some lip service. But you just mentioned it, Colin. The NBA league office loves this. This is mimicking the NFL, where there's the season and the playoffs and the draft, the combine, free agency. They love this. And frankly, you can change the rules all you want, but you can't legislate a guy changing his mind. That's going to happen. It happens every few years. This happens to be a very high-profile part of it. But, all this complaining, I don't care if you shrink the moratorium down to 3 days. A verbal agreement's going to be a verbal agreement, and guys are going to be able to get out of it. And I honestly don't think there's anything wrong with it unless you're a Dallas Mavericks fan, and then you've been irreparably harmed. But that's the game you play when you decide to play free agency.
I've never liked Darren Williams, the player. Where's he going to go? I've always thought he was overrated. Is he going to go to Dallas or something, go back home?
This is why America is a great country. So it's been a disaster in Brooklyn for Darren Williams. He's way underplaying his contract.
Yep.
Some of it's because he's been hurt. Okay, he's had some surgeries. He is going to get out of this contract. I do believe this is going to work out. He's owed $43 million over the next 2 years. My guess is he's going to take roughly half of that. And so that'll get him out of his contract because the Nets are looking to save some money. Then he'll go and re-sign in Dallas for the exact same amount or maybe even more than he gave up. And he'll get a free start in his hometown where he may actually end up ahead because of state tax differences between New York and New York City, frankly, and Dallas. And you may look at him totally differently. This is one thing I've learned over the years. You take a player who's making $20 million and you look at his production and you just say, man, this guy's a bum. All of a sudden that guy gets his salary halved or he moves on to a different stage of his career. He takes a cheap contract. You look at him totally differently. Like David West. Last year, David West did not have a great season. You could argue that his salary last year maybe wasn't commensurate with the way he played. This year he's going to sign for $1.5 million with San Antonio, and everybody thinks he's making the greatest sacrifice of all time. because we know these guys' salaries, we look at them totally differently. And my guess is if this works out and Darren Williams goes to Dallas, people will look at him differently.
Yeah, you're so right. I see this in our business, that business, sports business. A guy's got talent or he doesn't. We get caught up in the numbers. You either play or you don't, and you can or you can't. Brian Windhorst, good talking to you, bud.
Thanks, Colin. Have a great weekend.
You too.
You're in the Herd, the Thundering Herd podcast.
The three most famous calls of all time all involved the San Francisco Bay Area. We were listening as a staff because when Kenny Stabler died last night, I started going on. I said, and my guys didn't know it because they're in their 20s. I said, Stabler was part of, you don't understand how great the Raider teams were and how great those Steeler teams were. You also don't realize that Kenny Stabler was part of one of the most important plays, rule-changing plays ever. And I ran that holy roller call. If you've not heard it, let's play it one more time. Bill King's the announcer. This changed the NFL. This play, and I was a kid, at this point I was getting older because this was late 70s. Kenny Stabler had the ball rolled out, flipped it forward as he was getting sacked. The Raiders kicked it toward the end zone. Dave Casper, a great tight end, landed on it. And from that point forward, the league stepped in and said, you can't advance a fumble. This was the play that changed the rule. And I'm going to let you hear three different plays, play-by-play calls. They all involve Bay Area teams. And to me, they're the three greatest calls in the history of play-by-play. This is the first.
Here comes the rush. He sidesteps. Can he throw? He can't. The ball Flip forward is loose. A wild scramble. 2 seconds on the clock. Casper grabbing the ball. It is ruled a fumble. Casper has recovered in the end zone. The Oakland Raiders have scored on the most zany, unbelievable, absolutely impossible dream of a play. Madden is on the field. He wants to know if it's real. They said yes. Get your big butt out of here. He does. There's nothing real in the world anymore. The Raiders won the football game. The Chargers are standing, looking at each other. They don't believe it. Nobody believes it.
Is there anything better than you can hear people in the radio booth laughing? All right, the second call also involved the Bay Area team. The play. This is Joe Starkey. Cal trails Stanford. Stanford just wants to kick the ball off short, end the game. Cal starts lateraling the ball and ends up scoring as the band pours on the field. This was a Cal-Stanford game. Joe Starkey with the call.
They're still in deep trouble at midfield. They tried to do a couple of... The ball is still loose as they get it to Rogers. They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. He's going into the end zone. Will it count? The Bears have scored, but the bands are out on the field. There were flags all over the place. Everybody's milling around on the field. And the Bears have won. The Bears have won. Oh, my God. The most amazing, sensational, dramatic, heartrending, exciting, thrilling finish in the history of college football. California has won the big game over Stanford.
So the craziest NFL play happens in the Bay, the craziest college play, and my favorite call of all time is the Jack Buck 1988 Game 1 World Series involving the Dodgers beating again a Bay Area team, the Oakland A's.
We have a big 3-2 pitch coming here from Eckersley. Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable! A home run for Gibson. And the Dodgers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw. I don't believe what I just saw.
Jack Buck, the late Jack Buck, father of Joe. So, it is the craziest NFL play ever. Bill King, craziest college play ever in the Bay Area, Joe Starkey. We were rolling through play-by-play this morning. We did, now that I'm older, these guys don't remember. A lot of my staff, they don't remember these plays, and I'm like, these were groundbreaking. These were, at the time, led the national news. They were everything.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt, frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
So yesterday, Kevin Love came out and said, one of the reasons I came back to Cleveland was that LeBron James and I met in Los Angeles. He was in L.A. the same time I was, and he was unsigned, uncommitted at the time. And Kevin Love says, I sat down with LeBron, and we talked about everything. We were very honest, and we came to a really good place, and we agreed on a lot of things. And I tried to simplify it for the guys this morning, and I said, all LeBron said is, do you want to average 24 and lose or 19 and win titles? And Stanzik said, man, that's a tough conversation. And I said, no, it's not. Because LeBron James can say, I can score 34 a night in Orlando and lose, or I can score 22 and a half in Cleveland and win. So I'm doing the same thing. In football and basketball, legacies are shaped not by stats, but by titles. You don't even know how many yards Tom Brady's thrown for. You don't even know how many touchdowns he had last year. You know the titles. In baseball, nobody's legacy is punctured because they didn't win a title. Ken Griffey is great, period. Roberto Clemente was great, period. Hank Aaron was great, period. But it's different in basketball. It's different in football. I mean, think about basketball. Think about this. Do you know the number 2 scorer in the history of the NBA? Now think about this. How long has pro basketball been played in this country? Decade. Karl Malone, what is he, number 2 all time? He scored the second most points in NBA history. What is he, 2 or 3? 2. Dominique Wilkins is 12, Alex English 17. We never talk about him. So you can either score 26 a night and be irrelevant. Chris Bosh, if he never goes to Miami, we never talk about Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh was a topic daily on our show for 4 years because he got titles. Remember, the NBA regular season, people don't watch it. The NBA ratings quadruple in May and June. That's when you sell shoes. That's why, like Nike and Adidas, they want their star players in their shoes to play in the Olympics and get to the playoffs. And they push them towards winning teams. I can assure you that whoever Kevin Love has shoes with got in his ear, or at least they were thinking about it and saying, Kevin, we want you on TV May and June for the next 6 years. You're going to be in the NBA Finals for 5 of the next 6 years. So are our shoes. I've told you this for years. Agents and shoe companies shape free agency. Mark Cuban thinks it's the owners. It's the agents and it's the shoe companies. Because nobody watches the NBA until May and June. The last week of April, May, June. Those companies want their shoes and apparel on television during the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ratings. I mean, we're only talking about Kevin Love now because he's connected to LeBron. He was a stat monster in Minneapolis. Never talked about on the show. So, I mean, Karl Malone is the greatest example. Do people realize Karl Malone, like number 2 all time? When's the last time he was a topic on the show? I mean, so for a player, when you're a player, do you want years and years and years later to still be making endorsement dollars? Having companies pay you $100,000 to come and speak in front of their CEOs? Of course you do.
Colin Cowherd. The Thundering Herd Podcast.
He's a Hall of Famer on behalf of Gillette, Frank Thomas, as we get ready for the All-Star Game. It's the Herd on ESPN Radio. So, Frank, first of all, it's amazing. You hit 500-plus home runs. People don't realize this. You also won a batting title, and you're a 300 career hitter. Today, Frank, almost every team hits below 260. When you watch a game today, Frank, why do you think that's the case?
Well, one, Colin, I think we're in a golden age of pitching. I think you got so many young guys out there bringing the ball 95 and 98 miles an hour, which is unheard of. Second of all, I just think teams are paying more for the big bang, which is a home run, and guys really not caring about getting on base as much. They're really shooting for the fences every at bat. In my day, in my time, I always cared about scoring runs, so getting a hit was something I took pride in. I didn't like to strike out. I couldn't sleep, during the off season if I struck out 200 times. That just seems like a serious failure to strike out 200 times a season.
Bryce Harper is more of the swinging hard every time, going to strike out more. When it's all said and done, what kind of numbers can you project for a Bryce Harper?
Bryce Harper was getting a lot of flack from the media for not taking off as a 19-year-old. This guy's 22 years old. He's played the big leagues for 3 years. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
You see what he's capable of this year. I lived out in Vegas. I heard all the stories of this kid coming up. When you compare a kid to LeBron James out of high school, I mean, it's tough to swallow sometimes. There's some growing pains in the big leagues. It's a different sport. But now he's in that high gear, and you're seeing the incredible talent he is. Mike Trout is a very, very special young man. Watching him play and get better every year so far, it's been amazing to watch. So I look at both these guys playing themselves into the Hall of Fame one day, if they stay healthy. I mean, health is the key with these guys, especially with Bryce Harper because he plays so hard. But, watching these guys, they could be some historical players.
Yasiel Puig has transcendent talent, just doesn't get along with teammates. Where does he fall for you as a player?
He's a super talent. Reminds me of the closest guy I've ever seen that reminds me of Bo Jackson. With all of his attributes, he can do it all. But he just really mentally hadn't put it all together. I'm hoping one day he puts it together because he's a special talent. He's an exciting player to watch. But, it comes day and time that you got to really sit down and really focus on the game. I think focus is where he's missing a little bit right now, and having that great teammate around him that can help keep him focused.
Frank Thomas, Hall of Famer, inducted last year, 521 home runs, 2-time MVP, also a career .301 hitter. You won a home run derby in '95. I have defended players, power hitters, who don't want to mess up their swing in the home run derby. And I also think it's a little shticky, and it doesn't bother me when a LeBron James doesn't want to be in a dunk contest. When you look at the home run derby, if a home run hitter said, hey, man, I just don't want to do it, would it bother you?
Not really bother me, but I think there's an obligation for the younger superstars to be a part of it. I mean, I tell people, I won the Derby in 2005, and that really put me on the map, put me in everybody's eyes as a superstar, because the next night I homered in the game. So for the guys, 4 years and under, first couple times in the All-Star game, please enjoy the home run derby. Once you've been there 5-6 times, I get it. You don't really want to mess up your swing or whatever else, but you owe the obligation to the fans, I believe, in the first few years, being a part of the All-Star Fan Festival, everything else you're doing.
Frank Thomas joining us for Gillette, the Herd on ESPN Radio. How shocked are you at A-Rod's numbers this season for a 40-year-old?
I'm not shocked. The guy was the first pick of the draft for a reason when he came out. He's a super talent, one of the best talents we've ever seen in the game. Yes, I'm one of the guys who's been extremely disappointed with Alex because I watched him when he came up as an 18-year-old kid. But you're talking about tremendous talent all the way around the field. I'm not surprised at anything he does. I thought he'd have a problem staying healthy this year. Being on drugs and everything else at 40 years old, I thought it would break down a lot easier. But to see his hand-eye coordination, it's nothing new to me. I've played against Alex so long, I know how great the guy is.
You never had to worry about that stuff. You did it the right way. It's understood, Frank, that you didn't take PEDs. When in the heart of the sport, 92, 94, 98, it was active. It was everywhere. When did you first notice it? Could you just eyeball guys and think, man, he looks stacked over 6 months of the off season? When did you notice it?
Well, being a Goliath at that time, watching guys, catch up with me overnight, it's a red flag to me because I had a historical run there. First got to do the 100 thing and, over 30-some home runs every year. But overnight, guys would start to hit 40 and 50 home runs. I'm like, something's wrong. I can only hit 40. I mean, my biggest year was 44 home runs. But I consistently averaged between 37 and 44. And at the time, I was upset because people were saying that I was lazy and not working. And my work ethic hadn't changed. I doubt if anybody outworked me in the offseason. So, it was one of those things that, you start eyeballing guys. But the money they started throwing in that era, if guys didn't really care about doing anything else or getting to the Hall of Fame, guys didn't care about it. So why not? That's why they did it.
Yeah. Did you resent those guys?
No, I didn't resent them at all. You got to do what you want for your family, but don't come crying saying you were clean when you're not. I had a problem with that.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's funny, Frank, you and Ken Griffey are the two hitters with power that we never consider to be on it. Does that mean something to you?
It means a lot. But I came from a football background. I knew those hard workout sessions. I was a power lifter in college. I had to. Because I had to go bang 300-pound linemen every night. So, that's one of those things that you work your butt off for, and it was my advantage when I came into baseball. That's why I was the biggest, strongest guy, because I had a football background. And when you follow in the path of a Bo Jackson, you watched that guy work out back in the day, you understood, what total sport was all about.
Frank Thomas, first-class guy, Hall of Famer inducted last year, and you may not realize it. Beyond the 500 home runs, a career .301 hitter who once won a batting title and clean. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Frank Thomas for Gillette.
Check out The Herd with Colin Cowherd weekdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com, and on ESPNU. The Thundering Herd Podcast.